son graduated from preschool earlier this week, and yeah, thank you very much. Very proud. It is quite an accomplishment at that age. So when I asked him what his favorite part about preschool was, he thought for a few moments, and then he said something that I think a lot of us can relate to: being the line leader. That was the one thing more than anything else that the highlight of the experience was for him. Now, I wouldn't have minded if it was something a little more educational, but that's okay. Because I think all of us kind of remember what it was like to be the line leader, to be the person in the front of that line, blazing the trail, taking the class to who knows where, being there, also in some sense being the most, the most important role, because you're the one that's guiding the path, right? Now, what's ironic is, as much as students, and we all remember that, as much as students love being the line leader and being first, schools traditionally hate that role, are terrified of being the line leader. Why? Well, because being in the front of the line has an element of risk. You're going somewhere where other people haven't necessarily gone before, and there are all kinds of terrible things that possibly could happen. There's a lot of fear there. I know a little something about being first. I've kind of almost, in some sense, made a career out of it. I was the first educator to begin podcasting way back in the day. I didn't have any real equipment. I didn't even have a microphone. I had a Casio camera, a digital camera that I would talk into that recorded MP3s. My podcasting studio was a Mitsubishi Eclipse on Lakeshore Drive with a mysterious rattle in the trunk, which turned out to be an axle that my mechanic thought ought to have been more attached than it actually was. And it wasn't very good, but while even the reason that I did it, and the reason why I wanted promoting it so much and trying to let people know about it wasn't because I really wanted so many people to be listening to me, although I will admit I have the ego of a middle schooler. The main reason was because I was hoping to blaze a trail that other educators, other teachers, other students would follow behind and share the greatness that's happening in their own classrooms. That's what I was kind of hoping to do. More than anything, I was hoping to inspire others so that then I could just step back and listen to some really good stuff. So the point is, it wasn't so much that I started podcasting and started promoting it. It's that the effort that goes into making those connections with those other people. Hi, how are you?
I am well. We're going to get you.
It's nice to see you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, so this wasn't working before? Can you guys hear me? All right, good. It's a very friendly event here, I'll tell you that much. It took a lot of time and effort cultivating that community and going. I used to find every podcast directory that I could possibly find to promote it. I would go to every podcasting conference that I could find. I went on people's blogs, Twitter. I actually had business cards printed out from Office Depot, of course, and handed those things out to try and kind of build somewhat of an audience just so I could hopefully help spread that word and other people would kind of follow suit. I was also the first educator to start off on Twitter. My Twitter birth date is October 23rd, 2006. You could write that in your notes if you want to send me a gift. That was roughly 4,048 days ago today. And yes, I took the time to figure it out. As I said, I have a ego of a middle schooler. But when I looked up, there's a service where you can actually go back and look up your very first few tweets. My very first tweet was, like everybody else's, trying out Twitter. My second tweet, though, was adding a Twitter badge to my blog. Now, at the time, there was barely anybody using it. It was before it kind of really made a big splash at South by Southwest. No one really heard of it. But even at that moment, at that second tweet, I knew that the real power in that sort of a technology, that sort of a communication tool, was being connected with other people so that you can elevate the things that you're doing and see what other people are choosing to elevate as well. Celebrating those micro moments together. That's the whole key to it. And in some sense, in order to try and build up an audience like this, you have to have an element of marketing. You have to know how to market yourself, and I really do believe this is a critical skill in the 21st century. Because it sounds weird to say this, but being great nowadays just isn't good enough. Being great is all well and good, but if nobody knows about the things that you're doing, if you're not actively going out there and sharing them, well, then it kind of gets wasted. The best example I could find of this was a young boy named Kane. Some of you may have seen this video online, Kane's Arcade. He lived in East LA. He went to, all summer long, he would hang out in his father's auto body shop. And he was a big fan of these sites like, places, arcades like Chuck E. Cheese and Shakey's Pizza and Showbiz, those kinds of things. And he decided to build his own out of cardboard. He built a skee-ball machine, a claw machine, tickets, swipe cards, everything that goes along with it. And nobody knew. And nobody played. Until somebody happened to come through the door, see it, recognize the genius that was there, and Cain was lucky enough that that man was a filmmaker. If that filmmaker hadn't walked through the door, nobody would even know about Cain right now. 2.5 million views later, he's an internet sensation. And through the little widget that's on the side of that site, they have managed to raise over $200,000, A, to give Cain a scholarship to college and see what he can actually do with an engineering degree, and B, to also help find other kids like this. It's a shame that there was a good chance that Cain may never have been discovered for the genius that he is. But that's what's happening, I think, in a lot of our schools right now. There are wonderful things happening in our schools, and unfortunately, those stories don't always get elevated. They don't get told. It's so much easier to focus in on the negatives. We hear it constantly. The American education system is in a crisis of relevancy. We need to dismantle it. We need to rebuild. We need to take everything apart and reconstruct it. I got news for you. That's not going to happen. Schools are institutions. Institutions move slowly. Yes, we might wind up going to private or charter, but it's new paint on an old toy. There's not that much of a shift. But here's the beautiful thing about it. I travel a lot for my job with Discovery. I go to conferences, I go to schools, I go to institute days, I see teachers on a daily basis. And while you can criticize the education system as a whole, as a nation, you can criticize it at the state level. If you really want, you can even criticize it at the local level. But when you get into those classrooms, I have found that the teachers that are there are absolutely phenomenal. We have some of the best teachers in the world right here locally, right here in Texas, in the United States of America. And I got to tell you, it drives me crazy when I see people keep trying to tear them down. Yes, we could say that we want to make some changes, but the reality is the innovators and the people who are making those changes are in the classrooms. Not one of them. I have never met a teacher that was satisfied. There's a perception that everybody's, that the teachers have been doing it for 30 years and that they want to just keep doing it the same way because they're lazy or this or that. I have never met those teachers. The teachers that I have met are the ones that are slave away every single day, and then they go home and they do more. And then on the weekends, they're doing more. And they're trying to connect with other educators to become better. There are great things happening in our classrooms, but what we're not doing is elevating those stories. Our schools are so much better than they make them out to be in the USA today. But we're not taking those stories and we're not celebrating them. We're not making them as visible because that level of transparency is scary. It is. Because what if you put up a video of students online and somebody leaves a negative comment? What on earth do you do? And that little pervasive nugget of perceived fear is enough to let these kinds of things never even happen in a lot of our schools. It's not even actual reality. It's perceived reality. And that's a shame. That's a shame because there are great things that are happening. My very first day as a kindergarten teacher, I had the idea of maybe putting up a webcam up on the wall in the corner so that way parents or the community or my fellow teachers or friends could actually just kind of get a glimpse of what's happening in the classroom at any given moment. I thought that would be kind of a cool idea. My administrator, when I told it to her, said she could not think of anything more terrifying. What if you turn your back and a kid trips and falls and we get sued? You know what? At the time, I let it go. I thought, you know what, she's got some experience, maybe she's right. I shouldn't have. And it turns out, thankfully, other people picked up that gauntlet and have run with it. There's a guy named William Chamberlain who since 2009 has had a webcam in his classroom, allowing anybody to just pop in at any moment to see what's going on. Why? Because he knows that great things are happening there and they are worth sharing. When I asked him just a few days ago, what is the single worst thing that has ever happened from you putting that webcam in the classroom? And he couldn't come up with anything. And yet when I asked him what kind of great things have happened from it, he couldn't stop talking. That's a wonderful thing. Because once again, there's the perceived fear versus the actual reality and the potential for greatness, and we need to find that sort of that balance. Another example, Maria Nee. She's a kindergarten teacher, and one of the things she did on her blog was she put in a little widget called Yak Pack, and what that allowed you to do is anybody who visited her page could click on it and start talking walkie-talkie style with her kindergarten students. We're not talking about like a pre-scheduled Skype call or anything along those lines. This is you visit her page, you click and say hello, and her students can answer back. Now think about that. Anybody could visit that page. Think about all the horrible, no good, very bad, terrible things that they could say, right? Didn't happen. Because the people who visit her page happen to be parents, grandparents, friends, colleagues, teachers, and so on. And it's not like she just took those kids and threw them in a lake without teaching them to swim. They talked about contingency plans. What happens if someone jumps onto there and starts saying inappropriate things? You know what she taught them to do? Grab the little pluggy thing and pull it. And that was it. That was it. They never even had to pull the pluggy thing. Once again, it's the perceived risk versus the potential for greatness, and that's what's out of whack right now. You know, when these technologies come along, I heard somebody, the inventor of the Terrafugal, one of these flying cars, he said that technologies go through 3 phases of adoption. The first one is when they're first introduced, they are ridiculed, they are mocked mercilessly. And the second phase is they are violently opposed. And the third phase, they just become self-evident. They just become self-evident. Think about all these different technologies that are now commonplace. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, blogs, Foursquare. Think about Foursquare when it first introduced. For those of you that don't know, it's something that you use to check into places. So if I go to Walgreens after this, I can check in and let other people know Steve just checked into Walgreens. Why on earth would anybody care about that? Guess what? A few million people do. Because it helps make those micro connections. It helps me share what I'm doing in my life with the people that care about me for one reason or another. Next, it was violently opposed. If you go to Walgreens and you check in at Walgreens, someone is going to notice that you're not home. They will go to your house. They will rob you. They will kidnap your children. Someone actually created a website called pleaserobme.com, and all it did was aggregate all the people who weren't home right now. So if you're a thief and you're looking for a target, here's your site. You want to know how many people got robbed? 0. None. It didn't happen. The perceived threat was so, and now it's almost, it's just self-evident. It's not a big deal. Facebook check-ins and Foursquare check-ins, it's become almost commonplace. See, we went through the same thing at Discovery when we decided we wanted to reinvent the textbook a few years ago. At first, people thought we were absolutely nuts. Why on earth would you want to go into digital textbooks when the paper companies have been there for so many years? They're so embedded in the system. It wasn't just because we thought we could do better. The reason was because we have seen teachers in the classroom and the way that they teach. And what we found was there isn't a teacher in this country that opens up a textbook, starts at page 1, and goes to page 300. They don't do that. They own their content. They mix and match. They find ways to provide high-quality educational students based on their experience and the needs of their students. And that's what the experience that we want to provide. That's why we created a science tech book, which gives them the raw materials, and it allows it to be customized from the state down to the local level, down to even the individual district level, because we know not everybody teaches the same way, not everybody has the same needs. At first, it was insane, and people looked at us like we were crazy when we were trying to get this sort of thing adopted. But now it has actually been adopted within 6 states, including the great state of Texas. It is a phenomenal thing going into those classrooms, and the one thing I hear from more and more teachers that wind up using it is it's not that it's changing the experience in the classroom. What it's doing is empowering them. And that's what it's all about, teacher empowerment, and allowing us to then take what they're doing and elevate it and celebrate it and acknowledge the great things that are happening there. That's what I want us to do. I want us to tell the great stories that are happening in schools. Can you put up the next slide? One thing that I would love each and every one of you to do, we just had recently Teacher Appreciation Week. What I would love you to do is take out your cell phones right now. Send a text message to 37607. The first word you should type in your text message is TEDxCRP. And then you've all been kids, have kids, or at one point were a kid. Send a text message that identifies a teacher who had a profound influence on you and what they did. Share a moment to thank them. And then that's what I want you to do right now. What I want you to do when you leave here is I want you to seek out your schools, whether you've got kids in those schools or not is completely irrelevant, and let them know that you want them to be sharing the great things that are happening in these schools, that you want to help celebrate them. Find them whether they are on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on a blog, wherever they are, and if you can't find them there, if they aren't sharing things on a daily basis, call them, email them, ask them why not, and let them know that it's okay, that it's all right. And then, once they are there, follow them, like them, leave comments, help celebrate those successes. Because I've seen it again and again that a single comment can be the motivation that keeps somebody going throughout an entire year. Be that person. Is that wonderful? There are great things that are happening. People say we need to innovate our way out of this mess. I totally disagree, because I think the innovators are the ones in the classrooms right now. I think there are great stories that are happening in our classrooms right now, and what we need to do is just help our schools to be bold, to be fearless, and not to be afraid to be first. Thank you very much.